So it's a great pleasure and privilege to have a chance to talk to Maurice Bloch. Maurice, where and when were you born?
I was born in Caen, in Calvados, which is a place where I've spent 15 days or so, and that's all in my life. I have no family connections from Normandy. My family comes
When were you born?
1939.
1939. Your family?
My family comes from sort of two different areas of France. One lot from Lorraine, the other lot from Bordeaux area. Bordeaux area, and Bayonne a bit further south. So sort of a product of that coming together.
Tell me about the two branches, something about what sort of occupations do they have? And
well, I mean, my father's family, the Bloch side actually also came from Lorraine. He was a miller. No, he was not a miller. My great-grandfather was a miller. It's called Maurice Bloch, from Lorraine. But the connection, I've had no connection with these people, with his family. I have quite a lot of connections still with my grandmother's family, who were from Bordeaux, who were Sephardic Jews from, if you go back, very, very far back from Portugal, and who were very rich in the 18th century, and who declined gradually until they had no money, so they carried on trying to marry various people like my grandfather, in the hope of getting a bit of money to match to their aspirations. So that's one side. They still many of them, large numbers of cousins all around the southwest of France. The other side, my mother's family, more interesting in anthropological terms because her father was a village school teacher in the Massif Central, but her mother came from Durkheim's family. She was the niece of Durkheim.
Really? Gosh.
And the first cousin of Morse. So they came from a little town in Lorraine called Épinal. It's the most boring place in France. I know. I've never been there. And they had this academic connection. And my mother knew Durkheim quite well as a child, but I met Morse several times.
Did you?
Yes.
Really? Gosh. What was he like?
Well, he was very old when I knew him, and he was more or less, towards the end of his life, he was more or less off his head. And he lived in the same block of flats, or more than my grandparents, and so my grandmother used to go and take food round to him, and I used to come up and tag along from time to time.
You never had any deep discussions of the gift with him? Right. Gifts is appropriate. Tell me something about your parents as people.
Well, I mean, I never knew my father. My father was killed in the war. He was my father was a rather odd product, at least of his mother's family, in that he got into Polytechnique, and he sort of was therefore in the French army at the beginning of the war, and he was arrested by the Germans very, very early on, as all sort of high army officers were, and was more or less killed very, very soon afterwards.
So you'd just been born, you were just a baby yourself?
I was a baby, yes. My mother is quite an extraordinary sort of person. She was a biologist, marine biologist. And at the beginning, immediately after my father was born,
After your father died?
He wasn't dead then, quite.
Oh, yeah.
She went to the headquarters of the Gestapo very famously, to complain to Heinrich, and of course they never let her out. And she was deported. This whole story has been been included in a couple of novels, actually, and she was sent to Auschwitz. But because she was a biologist, she was put with a number of scientists, slightly outside, managed to survive, because the Germans were trying to obtain rubber from dandelions, which had latex, and so they got all the biologists together, mainly people from Auschwitz, in a kind of lab nearby. So towards the end, she was put back with the others, but that was it. And so she was in Auschwitz, or near Auschwitz, most of the time during the war. So I never knew her during that time, and I was then sort of more or less adopted during the war by a Polytechnic friend of my father's, who included me in his family with a false name. So, and they brought me up, and I remained very, very close, and I still am to this day.
What was his name?
He was called Louis Netter. So my mother came back, and then after a while she married a British biologist called Kennedy, who she met at a conference. And so that's how I came to England at the age of 11.
What was his first name?
John Stoddart Kennedy. John Kennedy. He worked at the Agricultural Research Council here. And at which stage my mother had other children, but I kept very close touch with my French family. So
you haven't said anything about your mother's character, apart from the extraordinary nature of her survival. She had a strong influence on you? Was she intellectual?
Not very much. She was sort of incredibly hardened as a result of her experience, and therefore not easy to have much contact with. I mean, she was very, very tough. I mean, it's partly how she survived. She'd been a mountaineer before the war, and she always sort of remained very, very tough. My stepfather had much more influence, actually, John Kennedy, on my intellectual development. I sort of always interested in natural science as a result of that. Though I tried to keep away from it, having my stepfather and mother both being natural scientists.
So where did you go to school? Where was your first
school? First of all, I went to the Lycée Carnot in Paris, and then I went to school in Cambridge, in Perth School.
Oh, in Cambridge?
Yes.
Which one?
The Perth.
The Perth. Oh, I didn't know you were there. Yes, tell me about the Perth. How was it?
I didn't like it. I mean, I didn't like. I hated being taken to England, quite honestly. And so I was extremely uncooperative, really, in school. I mean, it's sort of,
But were there any subjects you enjoyed?
Oh yes, I mean, I was very influenced by a history teacher. I wanted to do history at university, and
what was his name?
Do it.
Do you remember?
Tanfield. John Tanfield. He's a brilliant teacher, and also an English literature teacher who was a member of the scrutiny group called Douglas Brown. Who both these people influenced me very much.
Were you a games player?
No, not at all. I totally had a dislike of cricket because it was English.
Anything English was out.
Yes, I quite like rugby.
Mm.
I'd been very good at boxing in France, and I did carry on to box as a child.
Mm.
So when I first came to England, I was good at boxing. The games master thought it was a good thing, and so as soon as he thought it was a good thing to have me boxing, I immediately stopped.
Contrariness is your middle name, Maurice.
What?
I said contrariness sounds like your middle name.
Yes.
And what about other hobbies? I mean, were you interested in music or art or
I
at school?
was interested in all sorts of things. I sort of became very keen brass rubber as a child.
Did you?
Yes, and I was very interested in the whole history around that.
Mm.
I mean, or rather, as a tool, sort of history. What else did I do? You know, as a kind of hobby.
Was music of interest to you?
Yes, I was sort of very regretted that I was never. I mean, I sort of very much like music, and I very much regretted that I never got a chance to sort of learn to do anything, and I sort of sing very badly. And that's.
Did you listen to a lot of it?
Yes.
Anything particular?
I like a whole lot of. I mean, it's basically classical music. Like basically the sort of the standard classical music, and then a few modern musicians, people like what's it called now? You know, the French composer Messiaen. I like Britain very much, John.
He's English.
Yes, that's right. No, I do like it, sort of, yes.
So you did reasonably at school, though. I mean,
fairly reasonably. Just
And,
not all that brilliantly. I mean, I sort of just managed to get into university.
Which university was that?
And I went to LSE.
The LSE?
Yeah. I sort of fell into it. I was going to do history. In fact, I sort of half started in Durham. But I fell into it. As a result of various influences.
And you changed from history into
anthropology, yes.
Into anthropology. How soon was that? I mean,
very soon, almost immediately.
And who were the teachers in? This is the Raymond Firth era, presumably.
That's right. It was Firth. They were.
It was about
Maurice
1960.
Friedman, who's there. Maurice Friedman was there. I mean, Firth was just ending. Maurice Friedman was there. The people who sort of had an influence on me were Firth, Maurice Friedman, and a man called Burton Benedict.
Yes, I know.
Who I liked. And then also I went a lot to University College. I became quite a fan of Mary Douglas before she was really well known. Adrian Mayer I liked very much. That was towards the end of my studies. Yeah.
Tell me something about any of those people's character or influence on you that you think would be useful. I mean, I know all of them.
Personality, I don't know. I mean, I was very. I spent a lot of my time at university acting.
Did you?
Yes.
What sort of acting?
Oh, largely in French plays, but in British ones as well.
Had you been acting at school? Was
No.
this? No.
But anyway, of these people.
Who was your personal tutor, so to speak, if you had one?
The one I remember was Burton Benedict, who was very sort of supportive.
American.
Like him. I admired Firth incredibly. I admired Adrian Mayer very much. And as I say, I very, I only sort of was in my third year heard Mary Douglas, and I thought, gosh, this is a really interesting person. And in a sense, I still remember the excitement of first hearing her.
This was 3 years or so before Purity and Danger, wasn't it?
Yes, but she already gave 1 or 2 lectures, basically, the stuff on the abominations of Leviticus. And that was quite dramatic.
Were there any people that on the fringes? I mean, when I was at the LSE, I used to meet people like Ernest Gellner and Ronald Dorr and people in philosophy, demography, David Glass and so on. Did you go to any of their lectures or meet any of them?
No, because I spent a lot of time at University College and I spent a lot of time acting. I sort of heard lectures from I was interested in linguistics, and I followed lectures in linguistics at SOAS. Rather bad ones, but still an interesting subject.
So you again did reasonably, but your mind was half elsewhere.
Yes, I mean, also I was quite politically involved at that time. Both my parents were in the Communist Party, though they left very early. But that I never had anything to do with the Communist Party. But I was quite involved via France, because I was spending a lot of time in France, with opposition to the Algerian War, before Vietnam War and so on, and that was quite important. Sort of
it was the Cuba crisis as well, wasn't it?
Yes, that was a bit later. And that didn't involve me so much. I was quite sort of passionate about these colonial wars, and it had influence on my my working in anthropology.
So at the end of your time as an undergraduate, it was 3 years presumably, so were you beginning to get interested in any particular part of the world? I mean,
yes, I was. I was interested in India.
Burton Benedict was a sort of, he was mad.
It wasn't so much his work. He was a very nice man. The person who really I felt I was really interested in was Adrian Mann. I would have quite liked to have gone on and doing the work on India. But I got the chance of coming here largely because Cambridge, yes. Yeah. The first I couldn't get. I only got a sort of what we call state scholarships. The second year, the first year, so therefore I wasn't sure how to support myself. I wanted to go on at that stage, and my forte was setting up a massive research project with French, with Germain Ditermin at the time, and so he said, "Oh, I'll find you some money to come as a research student here." Partly because he thought I could sort of act as a kind of bridge between the French and the British, and I sort of vaguely knew him. My parents vaguely knew him, so I came and said, "All right, I'll work in West Africa." I was not in the least really keen at all because my heart was very much on India. And then that whole program collapsed. Not quite sure what happened. And therefore he was landed with me, and also by then I got one of these these state studentships that were called. So I was freer, and he said, "Look, all right, you can do what you like so long it's in Africa." So because that was on that basis it got me in here, I think. And so I went to part of Africa which was the most Asian, which is Madagascar.
So that was the reason, because it was nearest.
It was partly also, I was very, I still had a tie to history, and I knew the history of Madagascar. Madagascar's quite exceptional in terms of, at least the African continent, in the amount of the history one knows, and the details one knows. So that was one element.
So who were your contemporaries as PhD students at that time?
My contemporaries as PhD students.
Carrie?
Carrie. Well, Carrie I actually supervised.
Carrie Humphrey, we ought to say. Yeah.
Yes.
You
I
supervised
her my first year as a graduate student, and she was the last year as an undergraduate, and the year afterwards we were both graduate students together. Which is one of the things which happens. So she became a contemporary. And my contemporaries were, I mean, the ones who were really, I knew well, I was Andrew Strathern very well. Marilyn, though she was still an undergraduate that last year. Adam Cooper. There were other people who were less well known. There was a man called Jim Farris, who I liked very much.
Oh, yes.
He was a good friend. Who were the others?
Was Johnny Perry just...
No, Johnny Perry came later, but we became quite friendly when I came back from Madagascar and he was about to go.
Oh, right.
So we were sort of, but we became friends then already.
Are there any...
So I was quite close to Andrew Strathern, Adam Cooper, Adam Cooper, Marilyn afterwards, Jim Farris.
Are any of those people who continue to influence you, or you like to say anything about as anthropologists or humans?
As humans, I think all those people I mentioned have remained friends. I'm not in very close touch with any of, I mean, not daily touch. The person I'm very close to is Johnny Perry.
Yes, because you...
and also, I like the kind of anthropology he did.
When you came to Cambridge, this must have been about 1963, something like that, 64. How did it strike you? I mean, well, of course you knew it from,
yes, I knew Cambridge.
From Perth, so it didn't feel too foreign or strange.
No.
Whether of the teachers, I mean, that generation was Jack, Edmund.
Well, you see, I started off with Meyer when he got part of that project, and then when the project fell apart, he sort of lost interest in me. And I always felt that of the graduate students, they were sort of, to a certain extent, the clients of different members of the faculty. I mean, sort of somebody like Adam Cooper, close to 40s, and there's a man called Jeffrey Benjamin, who was close to Leach, and Andrew was close to Jack, and so on. And I wasn't really close to any of them, which I rather enjoyed in a way, partly because of Madagascar, you see. There was a very sort of antagonism between Africa and Asia, and Madagascar is really in between, so it didn't really belong to anybody. Marilyn was in a similar position, I feel, that
Audrey sort of was partly...
I liked all those people. Yeah, I met sort of Audrey was sort of who became interested in me, and I liked her, and I think it was reciprocal.
This was Audrey Richards.
Yes. I liked all those people actually.
Did any of them formally become our supervisor?
The person who I sort of passed through various hands. As I say, I wasn't really of any interest to anybody until I sort of was passed on at the end. Was supervised by Tambi.
Oh.
And he, I felt, was the first person who actually understood what I was on about.
This is S.J. Tambaya.
Yes, who understood Malagasy society. I was working with the Marino Highlands, sort of irrigated rice cultivators. And he was really good. I mean, I would say, as a supervisor, he's the only person who really helped me in Cambridge. Though I got lots of ideas from the others.
Was there some similarity between his work in rice cultivating islands off India? Yes.
Yes. I mean, I'd always been a great admirer still am, of Edmund's sort of political system of the Highland Burma, which I think is an incredible book. I also continued to be rather independent in many ways, and began to get to know some of Lévi-Strauss's work then. I had a sort of mixture, I think, to a certain extent, because I was sort of still had in the back of my mind Firth and Living Man, and the very different influences of Leech and Fortes here. And I think my work was a bit odd in its combination of these two influences, as well, sort of French Marxist writers, who were totally unknown then in Cambridge.
Were they?
Who do you say?
Well, I was surprised that there was obviously Lévi-Strauss was known to Leech, but the Marxists were
not very well known.
Not very well known.
And they were beginning to publish in France.
I mean, as a human being, how do you get on with Edmund? Because he had quite a forceful character, as you know.
Perfectly well, yes. I liked him.
Was he?
I felt he was. For a very long time in Cambridge, I really felt that nobody was interested at all in what I was doing, partly because they weren't interested in Madagascar, I think. And then at the end, they all became interested in my work. And, at least Fortes, and Fortes never very much, though I liked Fortes very, very much. I don't think he ever was really. But Jack and Edmund both did. They read odd chapters of mine. They made very, very useful suggestions. The person who really helped me was stand by. And as a human being, I got on very well with them, but I was sort of slightly distant. I wasn't. I rather liked not being anybody's possession, like in a way people were certainly forced to at that time, partly because of the antagonisms between these people.
That was very notable, was it? That it was divided between the Fortes and Leech.
Yes, it was notable. But, in a sense, I don't know, I was just looking from the outside. The person I think who was most bitter about it all was Jack, actually.
He was most bitter about it?
Yes, I think bitter.
Because he was between them all?
Yeah. Well, he was bitter both, but I don't know. I had a feeling he was both bitter about both Fortes and, by then, and Edmund. I think he really did like him. I don't know, I may have been wrong.
Tell me about your going to the field. That was in your second year, presumably, is that?
Yes. No, I think I had an extra year before because of not having a grant, and so I was half working and all sorts of about a year and a half. So going to the field, I arrived in, I had made up my mind to work in Madagascar. I arrived in Madagascar with knowing absolutely nobody there, which is a very unusual situation, partly because there was nobody from Cambridge who had any connections with anywhere there. So I just put myself in a cheap hotel, and after a while thought I must go and find somewhere to go and study. And I found my field sites in sort of weird ways. After a while I just used to go to the sorts of bus lorry stations which were around the capital, and just go in any of them.
Randomly.
Because people didn't spoke Madagascar basically. So I didn't know, so I would go in one and just go. And I had some number of adventures like that. Though on the whole, people were extraordinarily nice, tried to look after me.
You mean you would get in a bus and just go somewhere?
I didn't know where I was going, yes.
That's called randomized sampling, I think.
Yeah, well, and then I met people indirectly like that, and I finally found the place I did field work
Mm.
like that, and I really enjoyed doing field work. I suddenly felt, I think the first time in my life, that I was really quite good at it, and that I was understanding some new things. You know, that this was different from the kind of anthropology I'd been taught. I was good at them, you know, at getting on with people. I was quite good at learning the language. I had the great advantage of being able to compare myself with a few totally useless French anthropologists who were around when I got to know that I knew that what I was doing was infinitely better. And so it gave me a lot of boost to my self-esteem. And by the time I came back to Cambridge, I felt, I think for the first time in my life, that actually I really was quite good. And but I got on by myself very much.
What was the theme? What were you trying to? What was the question to which you were trying to find an answer?
Well, I mean, my interests were originally very. I was interested in economy, economic anthropology, partly, you know, from a sort of Firth background. After all, I decided this was all rather boring, and I was interested in kinship. You know, the sort of big questions about kinship, and I did realise fairly earlier on that the Malagasy type systems were quite different from what I'd been taught, and that the focus on tombs, you know, that people define themselves in terms of where they're buried rather than who their ancestors are, was very interesting, and that's my focus.
So you let the situation